Good afternoon, everybody. This week's video is going to be about Dragontail Tenkara rods. I'll share my thoughts and experiences with the various Dragontail rods and hopefully shed some light on which Dragontail Tenkara rod might be right for you. Before I get started, as many of you know, I am a retired naval officer on submarines, and yesterday was Veterans Day, so I'd like to wish all the other veterans out there happy Veterans Day and thank you for your service. Just a quick disclaimer, earlier this summer I did become a Dragontail affiliate, so if you use my link that I'll provide in the description, I do get a small kickback for that. I will reinvest any of the money that I get from those, which is minimal, but I will reinvest it in getting additional equipment to help me produce additional videos. So for what it's worth, I'll tell you the good and the bad. I'm also going to do another video here in the near future comparing non-Japanese domestic market rods such as Dragontail, such as my Tanukis, as well as Wasatch Tenkara rods. I just picked up my first one of those. So I'll be doing some comparisons between the various manufacturers compared to Japanese domestic rods. That's one question I get asked quite frequently. And so we'll talk a lot more in depth about that. But today is going to be about Dragontail rods. I have 6 of them right now. So I've got the Dragontail Hellbender, the Shadowfire 365, the Mizuchi, the Mutant, the Foxfire, and the newest pack rod, the Kaida. I don't have, I believe it's the Hydra, and I don't have either one of the Nirvana rods. I would not say that any of the Dragontail rods are what I would consider an ultralight rod for their given lengths. The Japanese rods are typically, for a given length, much lighter. The weight of the Dragontail rods range from the Kaida, which is their pack rod. It's about 10.5 feet. That's 2.5 ounces. The Hellbender is their heaviest rod, which makes sense. It's their big fish rod, and they're the longest, one of the longer rods that they make, and that's at 3.4 ounces. The other ones are kind of in that 2.8 to 2.9 range, very similar. Kind of across the board with the other ones. One of the other neat things about all the Dragontail rods, I think all of them do, but they all come with a typical tip plug, and they also have a universal cap similar to what some of these other rods have, so you can kind of have your choice, whichever you feel most comfortable with, or if you lose one you still have a backup. So that's a nice touch, as well as you can have the options of getting a tube with them, and also you do get a kind of a color-coded sock that matches the rod itself. I mentioned being an affiliate. I have paid for all of these with the exception of the Shadowfire, which is, they're all on sale right now. But I did use some of the earnings that I had to purchase the Shadowfire rod. So that's the only one that I did not use my own money on. First off, I have lots of Japanese domestic market rods, and some folks wonder why I started buying some Dragontail as well as Tanuki rods. I also owned and fished several of the Tenkara USA rods, which kind of got me started in Tenkara several years ago. And then I switched over and started doing a lot more of the Japanese rods. But I've kind of come back to these, and really what got me started was some kind of a friendship and respect that I developed for Tom Davis of Teton Tenkara. And as a lot of people know, he was a co-creator, provided a lot of input with Brent at Dragontail regarding the Mizuchi. So I kind of got it out of respect for him, and just kind of figured if it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me. Quite frankly, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. So it got me looking at some of the other rods in the collection. Just kind of grew from there. I decided to use the Dragontail rods initially. My idea was as my travel rods. I traveled the state a lot, and I thought if I could have 2 or 3 of them in my car at any given time rather than a bunch of the Japanese market rods, because of the versatility with the multi-position rods and such, and quite frankly they're more affordable, and I wouldn't worry about them as much in my car and getting beat up and things like that. I'm going to use some various terms during this discussion: penny ratings, rod flex index. I'll put some links in the video description. If you're unfamiliar with those, you can go back and look at a couple of my other how to choose a Tenkara rod videos where I talk a little bit more about what those things are. But basically, pennies have to do with the stiffness of the rod. Rod flex index has to do with the action of the rod, if you think of it that way, fast action versus slow action, how stiff the rod is for its given length. And when I talk to folks that have not fished with a Tenkara rod before, and maybe they're coming from Western fly fishing like I did for 40 years, you always think about the 9'5" weight. And to me, that's kind of what the Shadowfire is. When you think of the specs of the rod, it's a 12-foot rod, which is right in that middle of that 11 to 13 foot most common lengths when it comes to Tenkara rods. And it has a penny rating of 20. And again, that has to do with the stiffness of it. So if you're somebody that's new to Tenkara fishing, don't know really where to start, or just want an inexpensive but quality rod that's kind of an all-round rod, that's really where the Shadowfire fits. Now, I mentioned I haven't fished it yet myself, but I will put a link in the video description to Tom Davis's review of the Shadowfire. He really says a lot of good things about it. I've heard a lot of good things about it. And what really makes this a great value is the fact that this rod is $85, the normal regular price. Right now, all the rods are actually on sale, $20 off. So $65, which is why I picked it up with a little bit of the cash that I had from my affiliate link. So I'm anxious to use it, provide my review on it, but Tom has already done that as well. So don't take my word for it. Go watch his video and read his description on it. The next rod I'll discuss is the Dragontail Hellbender. This is Dragontail's big fish rod. It's a 2-position rod, goes from 11-ish feet to 13 feet. So it goes a little bit longer than the Shadowfire, the 12-foot rod. And it's also 32 pennies. It's also going to be a little higher quality. It's actually rated down to about 3x tippet. So you can be confident fighting bigger fish. Still requires some experience and some technique fighting big fish, but if you want to, this is the rod that Dragontail makes that would fit in that slot. Now the Hellbender is a little bit shorter than some of my other big fish Tenkara rods, like the Onionru 450, the Gamakatsu 5.0, or the Daiwa LTH 44. So a little bit shorter, but very, very capable Tenkara rod. Like I said, is rated down to 3x. I've seen some pretty impressive videos. Tom, it's one of his favorite big fish rods as well. And I've watched a video of where he hooked into, a big carp with it. And I've seen pictures of fish caught with the Hellbender. It's just very, very impressive. So very capable rod, just a little bit shorter than some of the big fish rods that I use. The next rod that I'll talk about is the one that kind of started it all for me as far as my Dragontail kick, and that's the Mizuchi ZX320. So the Mizuchi is a 3-position rod. So it starts out about 7.9 feet and then goes to 9.5 feet and then 11 feet at its longest length. Now, you have to keep in mind, I mentioned Tom being a kind of a co-creator and providing a lot of input on it. He fishes a lot of tight streams, but they also have decent sized fish in them. So he wanted something that went, fairly short, which it does, but was very capable and kind of stiff or stout. And it is. At the 3 lengths, it's 16, 17, and 18 pennies. The feel of it is going to be a little bit stiffer than some of what you might call a full flex or a softer rod. It is very capable. And again, I've seen some very good fish caught on the Mizuchi. The next rod that I will talk about is the Mutant. And now this is a ZX320. So it is a 3-position rod. The longest length at 380 is just under 12.5 to 13 feet. I've made a comment in several of my videos that this is actually my favorite of the Dragontail rods currently. The Mutant, I mentioned, is a little bit stiffer. which is great if you're using bead heads, if you have good sized fish, throwing heavier lines, that sort of stuff. But as far as my style or what I enjoy fishing the most is a little bit softer rod. And that's where the ZX380 comes in. It is at all three lengths right around 12 to 12 and a half pennies. And it is a longer rod, 380 versus the 340 of the Mizuchi. So it's a little bit softer and it's longer, and it's going to have a little slower action, or putting it another way, a lower rod flex index. So it's, for me, especially if I'm using light lines or unweighted flies, the Mutant is just a very, very fun, very comfortable, and great casting rod. So the next rod is the Foxfire ZX320. This is a very unique rod. They wanted a short rod, but a short one that casts well. Typically short rods tend to be pretty stiff and not a lot of fun at their shorter lengths. So this is a hybrid fiberglass rod near the lower sections, and then with a carbon tip. So even when it's shorter, you have that flexibility. Fiberglass is a little bit heavier, so it's not a super light rod for its size of being just over 9 feet. It weighs, like I said, in that 2.8, 2.9 ounce range. But it's a very fun rod. What's different about it that you hear a lot of people talk about is it feels different at the two shorter lengths versus the longer lengths, and it totally makes sense. It's at the 12 penny rating at the two shorter lengths, but at the longer length, it actually drops down to 10.5. So it's longer and a lower penny rating is just going to make it a lot slower, makes it feel soft. And so it's a very different casting feel. Some people like it, some people don't, but the biggest thing to keep in mind with it is it's very different between the different positions. Some of the other rods like the Mizuchi or even the Mutant are much more consistent at the 3 different lengths for their rod flex index. So they feel similar. Obviously there's, longer and stuff, so you feel the difference, but it isn't as dramatic as it is with the Foxfire. So just keep that in mind. Some people, again, enjoy that slower. Some people don't, or have a preference one way or the other, whether they like faster or slower. This kind of gives you both. So keep that in mind. It's not going to feel the same, but it is a super fun rod. I've got a video coming out that utilizes the Foxfire. Just had a ball with it. So the last rod that I'll talk about is the Kida ZX320. Now it's 3.2 meters, so it's shorter than both the Mutant and the Mizuchi, but its penny rating is kind of in between them. So it's 14 and 16 pennies versus, like I said, with the Mizuchi is 16, 17, and 18, and the Mutant is around 12. So it's in between as far as the penny rating, but it's a shorter rod. So it's going to feel stiffer than the Mutant, but definitely not as stiff as the Mizuchi. So it's a 2-position rod. And what's unique about it is they're pack rods. So if you take a look at it, instead of being 24, 25 inches, like the Mizuchi and the Mutant, it's only 18 inches. So it's much more portable. To me, I really like the action of the Kida. It's a nice compromise in between the softness of the Mutant and the stiffness of the Mizuchi, but it is a little shorter and a little more compact. So it's great for backpacking that I do. And that's one of the things, both of the Mizuchi and the Mutant that I took backpacking this year, some of the ultralight rod tubes that I have only go to about 24 inches. So these don't really fit in them, whereas obviously the Kida does. And you don't have to use a tube, or you can use the tube that came with them, or if you got them one with it. But the tubes that I have don't really fit the 2 longer rods. Now the Kida is actually rated to 4X. Some of the other rods don't really have a tippet rating per se, other than I know the Hellbender, I've seen it in writing saying 3X. This is 4X, which is kind of surprising for me, just by the feel of the rod. It doesn't feel like a 4X rod, which is fairly stout. And I've seen some pictures quite recently of some very large fish in that 4.5 pound range caught on this little rod. So very impressive. I've not come close to testing it to that degree. I've caught a bunch of little brookies on it so far, and maybe something in the mid-teens, but nothing that big yet, although I look forward to trying. Now, I mentioned I haven't fished the Hydra, so I won't spend any time talking about it. The same thing with the two Nirvana rods. Just as an FYI, the Nirvana rods are kind of the sister to the Dragontail rods, but kind of their premium line, so a little bit better finish on them, a little bit better quality, perhaps carbon fiber on them, so they can be a little bit lighter, a little bit stronger, certain characteristics of more premium materials. But for me, the Dragontail line has, I actually fished them this year. I fished them more than probably any of my Japanese rods, partly because I use them a lot when I'm on the road working. And again, so I keep them in my car, makes them very convenient. But the real reason probably is the fact that they're kind of designed for the way we fish in the United States a lot more than some of the Japanese rods are. When you think about how people use Tenkara rods in the United States, typically bigger fish than what they fish for in Japan. We use a lot of bead heads, more so perhaps than the unweighted kabari that they do in Japan. Not to say that they don't, but on average, I would think our water's bigger, our fish are bigger, and we catch a lot of things that aren't trout. So we need a little bit more capable rods in some situations. But in general, the versatility of some of these rods, like the 3-position Mizuchi and the Mutant, Foxfire, just affords you a lot of variation on the water and the fish that you can chase with a single rod. So and the other aspect is, in a lot of cases, these rods are less expensive than the Japanese rods as well. All of these rods are in the, ranging from the Shadowfire I mentioned, the regular price, not on sale, is only $85, up to around $150 to $60, I think, for the Foxfire. But most of them are in that $140 range. So very affordable, relatively speaking, and so they provide a fantastic value. And like I said, I intended to buy just the one Mizuchi, just kind of to honor Tom, and ended up with several of them. So, and I've really enjoyed them. And like I said, I've fished them more than some of my other rods. Now, I'm not going to say that they're as good as a lot of the Japanese rods that I have, but for what you pay relative to what you get, the value of them and the versatility of these rods are really tough to beat. So again, I'll put my affiliate link in the video description, and if it makes no difference to you and you want to go buy some Dragontail equipment, specifically these rods, I will do another video with some of the other accessories that I've accumulated from Dragontail. But I do get a small fraction kickback. It's no extra charge to you or anything like that. So it's no more expensive for you. But anything that I do make, I will reinvest in Tenkara gear and help make more videos in the future. Feel free to put in your 2 cents in the comments regarding your experiences with Dragontail rods. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching.